Welcome everyone to this session highlighting the Voices of Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy at COP29. I'm Ariana Applelaw, Project Manager at Island Innovation and your moderator for today. I'm very excited for today's session where we'll hear from the dynamic young leaders who are driving change in their communities. Before we dive in, a few quick logistical details. All attendees will be muted and without camera, so please feel free to focus on the session. If you have any questions for our speakers, please kindly use the Q&A function. When submitting your question, include your name, country, and let us know which speaker you're addressing. I'll be selecting and reading the questions live, so stay tuned. And lastly, this session is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So please feel free to share it with your networks. So today we have the wonderful delegates from our Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy who have been selected for COP29 and who will be sharing their expectations for the conference, which will be happening in Baku, Azerbaijan, running from November the 11th to the 22nd. For those of you that don't know about our program, the Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy is all about empowering young people from small island developing states in the Caribbean to step up as climate leaders. It's a hands-on program provided by Island Innovation, where participants learn, connect, and build the skills that they need to tackle climate challenges within their communities. Through workshops, mentorship, and real-world projects, these young leaders not only making a difference at home, but also in bringing the Caribbean voices to the global stage, like at COP29 starting next week. I'm very excited for them to share with you today what they've been working on in their respective islands, the challenges that they face, and their expectations going into COP. So, without any further ado, I would love to welcome the first delegate, Tyrell, to the stage to share a little bit about these experiences and these expectations, and we will then go to a Q&A at the end. So please do write your comments in the chat. Thank you, Tyrell.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the lovely introduction, Ari, and thank you very much to everyone for taking the time this afternoon or morning, wherever you are in the world. I know I saw someone comment that they are from Turkey to join us and really hear what we as CCJLA champions are expecting of our COP29 experience. So I am Tyrell Gittens. I currently live in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm a geographer and environmentalist and a journalist. So I've been fortunate enough over the years to work in one way or another in those fields. I am currently a consultant with the Crupper Foundation, which is based in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's essentially an organization that works to build the capacity of other NGOs across Trinidad and Tobago, as well as work in areas of sustainable development and sustainability. At the Crupper Foundation, I am the coordinator and I'm the editor of the Caribou Environmental News Network, which is a reporting platform with the mission of empowering citizen journalists across the Caribbean. So I've been fortunate to work with writers, journalists, and content creators from over 7 Caribbean countries, as well as we have partnerships with different organizations locally and regionally. And in these partnerships, in connecting with these writers, journalists, and creators, we essentially aim to give a community perspective to environmental issues, such as climate change and the different environmental crises, such as biodiversity loss. We know that usually when the media spotlight environmental issues, it's usually from a very general perspective, but we understand the value of highlighting these issues from a community perspective, as well as empowering people at the community level to not only understand how these environmental issues affect their daily lives and their livelihoods, but also give them the tools to be able to communicate this accurately and effectively. So if there is a lack of media coverage in their countries or in their communities, they can fill that gap. In addition to our reporting objectives, we also have educational webinars, one of them given COP29, I think, is very appropriately called the Climate Breakdown Series. So under that series, since April 2023, we have been highlighting a lot of different climate issues here in the Caribbean, but not only highlighting the issues, but having experts participate in these sessions so we could discuss solutions, because of course we are aware of what the issues are, but it is also, I think, time, in my opinion, that we start focusing on the solutions. And another aspect of that project is we are working with young students from across Trinidad and Tobago to help empower them with climate journalism skills. So it's something that we did last year, where we would have worked with 8 young people from 4 communities across Trinidad and Tobago, and we had training sessions with media professionals from across the region, as well as climate experts, and really introduce them to not only topics about climate change, but also give them the tools to effectively recognize those issues and communicate it amongst their community and to their peers. So I'm very grateful that this year we are now doing the second edition of that project, and it's being supported by the Scotiabank Foundation in Trinidad and Tobago. So now I'm happy to share that we are working with even more students, and this time directly with schools. So we are working with 20 students from 10 schools across Trinidad and Tobago. They have had the opportunity to learn from journalists, specifically environmental journalists and climate experts on the theme of climate change. So that's a bit of what I do. I'm also, as I mentioned, a journalist. Before I've had this awesome opportunity to work at the Cropper Foundation, I worked here in the local media in Trinidad and Tobago, where I did a lot of environmental reporting, including a series on Trinidad and Tobago's unique biodiversity and our different species. I also currently write for the University of the West Indies, um, UE Today magazine here in Trinidad and Tobago, which is published in one of Trinidad and Tobago's national newspapers. So I think I would also love to share a bit about what I expect at COP29 now. I recently had the very awesome opportunity to attend the COP16 in Cali, Colombia, as a youth delegate to the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. And as youth delegates in that space, we would have essentially used our voices to advocate our youth perspectives when it comes to the implementation of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We really wanted to see it being a very inclusive implementation process that adequately represents young people, women, and local communities. We also strongly advocated for a rights-based approach to decision making and implementation. So at COP29, with my fellow CCJLA champions, as I like to call them, I think we are going to go into that space. And I mean, I know I said we, but I'm sure this is a sentiment that they all share. In terms of, we want to ensure that we call on decision makers in that space to ensure that as countries fulfill a nationally determined contribution, their entities, that it is a very inclusive process, as well as we want to be in that space and really speak truth to power in calling the global north countries there for not only the role that they play in the climate crisis, but also the responsibility and the accountability that they have to show to help us as small island developing states, not just in the Caribbean, but around the world, and become more climate resilient. Because I think you have heard it being repeated a lot of times, as small island developing states. Even from Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm from, and we produce oil and gas, we still contribute, very little emissions to the climate crisis. So we want to be in that space and ensure that the real players in this climate crisis understand their role. So I'll stop there for now. Of course, I want to give my fellow CCJLA champions the opportunity to express themselves as well, and feel free to ask me any question during the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Tyrell. I really run out of, I forget sort of how many hats you have and where in the world you are at any one point. You're always doing fantastic things, and it truly is testament to this idea of you guys being champions. So thank you for sharing a snippet of the work that you do, and the impact that you make and the expectations that you have. We're going to move on to Chelsea, but I'm sure there'll be many questions in the chat and we can always loop back to those. So thank you so much. Chelsea?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chelsea Gill Anthony, and I am from Belize. I like to refer to myself as an environmental communicator, and what that means simply is that I talk about environmental issues in a way that makes it accessible and relatable for people to understand complex topics like climate change. I am a communications officer for the Belize Fund for a Sustainable Future, and I also volunteer as communications coordinator with the Caribbean Youth Climate Council. With regards to my participation with Island Innovation for COP29, looking at the Caribbean's perspective and what it is that we're hoping to achieve. We want more funding for the Loss and Damage Fund to increase climate finance for vulnerable groups, and also to see ways in which the world, these major emitters and polluters, are ambitiously looking to transition away from fossil fuels so that we can keep our warming below 1.5. As you know, the Caribbean has adopted, championed, led the initiative on 1.5 to stay alive, and really we know how important it is for us. My participation with Island Innovation has been to see how I can amplify youth voices, because oftentimes youth voices are marginalized when it comes to climate policy and decision making, especially in regions like ours, and despite us being one of the most affected groups. And so current systems we find tend to be tokenistic, and there's a need to shift towards something that's structured, that allows young people to be engaged and included meaningfully. And so one of the things that I am looking to pilot in Belize with the goal of creating an action plan for my government and young people, I'm hoping that it can be replicated throughout the Caribbean. And so when we move away from these tokenism towards something that's genuine and inclusive, we seek to ensure that young people's voices are heard and considered in policies and decisions that advance climate justice and build resilient communities. And so I think that our audience may be hearing, meaningful youth engagement more and more. And there are core principles that this phrase or activity is built on, and just go over it briefly, touching them on that it has to be rights-based and safe, institutionally mandated. We want seats that are designated for young people, adequate financing or resources that they can access, that the information is transparent and accessible, that young people's participation is voluntary, that it's informative. There's this reciprocal accountability between our decision makers. They need to say how our input is being used and shared. And also us, we need to make sure that we're communicating with the larger masses of young people so that it's not just our perspective, but we're bringing forward our community's perspectives as well. And we want it to be diverse and inclusive and look to young people as partners. Ari, over to you if you have any questions that I need to answer specifically.
No, questions will come at the end. Thank you so much.
All
And
right.
this idea of seats dedicated to young people, but that are informed, and young people having a platform but using it in the correct way. And as I think the point of the academy and similar academies and educational resources are to do this, to get young people in spaces, but to have them meaningfully contribute to the conversation and sort of respected in a way that policymakers can relate to. And I think, yeah, you guys are a real testament to power being knowledge. So thank you for really investing into the program and applying that in the real world at COP. So we look forward to seeing how that's
Uh,
gonna turn out.
I'll say one more thing before passing over. So my time part of the academy, it's been very immersive, the whole program, and there's been a range of topics. Some of the ones that I've enjoyed were elaborating on what intersectionality looks like, those that touch on mental health, and of course the ocean and climate change nexus. And that's been very important to me. So the program itself, for those who are interested in joining other cohorts, I would definitely encourage to join as well, because the information shared, the lessons learned, the lived experience that you hear from other members, it's very encouraging and insightful, and it definitely helps us to speak about climate change in a more informed way. Right, over to you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Very much appreciate that. I think we have two birds, one stone here. I think that Genesis and Nigel are in the same room, and will hopefully be able to log in. I know that they said they have slightly turbulent Wi-Fi at the moment. Are you guys able to join?
Hello, can you see and hear us?
I can,
Hi.
guys. I can't.
The internet might be a little laggy.
Yeah, I hear that.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Maybe we will quickly switch around the order, and then hopefully Genesis and Nigel can jump in if their internet improves. Joshua, are you able to join on the camera? There we are. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you may be in the world. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this session. We appreciate you taking time from your busy schedules to be here with us. So my name is Joshua Bardu, and I'm from the Caribbean archipelago islands of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Like Tyrell, I hold many hats, but just briefly, I like to describe myself as a lawyer. I am an activist, I'm a writer, and I'm also an NGO leader. And being a part of the Island Innovation Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Program has been very enlightening. It's been very informative. And I have been learning a lot, and I plan to hopefully use a lot of this knowledge and put it into action to help address the pressing issues of climate change and hopefully help to move forward the task of climate justice. Now, when I joined the program, it was mainly from a human rights and intersectional perspective, because oftentimes when vulnerable populations or groups are being impacted by a number of issues, including climate change, they are often overlooked in our societies. So coming into the program, I wanted to make sure that I brought with me that intersectional perspective, and a human rights perspective, because I officially describe myself as an international human rights lawyer. And I believe that this program has, went way above my expectations. I've learned about so many different topics, including the areas that I'm interested in and how it impacts how climate change impacts vulnerable populations as children and women, etc. I'm really elated to have been selected as one of the top 8 leaders from the program. And I'm really excited to be going to COP, which will be my first COP. So I'm really excited to be joining the team, and I'm really excited to be in Azerbaijan. I hope I'm not butchering the name of the country. And to continue to connect with, amazing activists, advocates, and lawyers like myself, who are really at the forefront or working in various ways to advance, the pressing issues that we need to deal with in relation to climate change and to bring climate justice. I'm also really interested in learning, not just going and talking, but where possible, learning from people and their experiences and just listening. You know, sometimes it's good to be quiet and just listen to what is happening and learn so that I can hopefully be more informed. And even when I'm trying to apply everything that I'm learning, make informed decisions. Apart from that, I wish to just continue to, build networks with individuals and hopefully continue to collaborate. And most importantly, because I am into international law and how states act and behave with each other, hopefully I can see stronger commitments coming out of COP29. I know it's a finance COP, or that's what they're claiming the team is. But I would like to see stronger commitments from states and persons in great roles or in powerful countries or organizations across the world, making more commitments to really advance climate justice within our region, whether it's a new treaty or an agreement or a resolution is passed. I'm really looking forward to the legalese of what is going to be happening at COP. Yeah, so to today's program, I brought a human rights perspective, an intersectional perspective, with a specific focus on the rights of women, children, persons with disabilities, and especially LGBTQI plus persons, being a queer person myself. And I'm also, looking forward to see, what states do. So hopefully at COP, I hopefully can see a more intersectional perspective being taken. Hopefully there's some focus on its intersectional with vulnerable groups or with human rights. And also, hopefully I can see states making greater commitments to advance the issue of climate justice. I know sometimes documents sometimes just seem like people just writing and signing stuff, but hopefully more steps are taken in that regard, and also states commit locally and internationally to really bring climate justice in our world today and just network, learn, and of course, meet all the fabulous people from Island Innovation and other organizations, even my, COP team here. I'm really looking forward to meeting all of them in person, including Ari. So I'm really looking forward to COP29. Of course, there's a lot that I can say, but I look forward to any questions that any persons tonight might have for me. Thank you so much, and it's really amazing to be here tonight, and I really look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's really wonderful, I think, the kind of range of backgrounds we have from the different delegates. Joshua is our first lawyer. And I think it'll be really interesting to observe these negotiations with a lawyer, because as great as the kind of, observer level status that we've held before it's really important to understand it from a policy perspective and a kind of legal implementation perspective. And I think that'd be really, really valuable to this year's delegation. So I look forward to your insights. I thank you for your insights so far. And yes, on to the next. I think Whitney, if you are able to join on the camera, that would be fantastic. There we are. Take the stage. I think you're muted. There we
Okay,
are.
can you hear me now?
All good.
Okay, great. Hi, good afternoon, good day to everybody here. My name is Whitney Melina, and I am a research associate at the University of the West Indies Gable campus. I'm also an advocate for Indigenous rights and social and climate justice. I do not hold as many hats as Tyrell and Joshua, but hopefully one day I can achieve their status. So I will first start with the program, the reason that I am here today. I would say it was absolutely amazing. I have no regrets whatsoever. the units that were covered. I believe that they were timely, they were appropriate. And to me, the most impactful thing was the fact that the participants of the program was from all across the Caribbean, and we were allowed to really share our stories in real time, which to me really drove home the seriousness of addressing climate change issues in our respective areas. It was also really amazing to meet all of these wonderful people who are truly inspirational in their respective fields. And I hope that we continue to bond. Our relationship, surpasses COP, and we really grow together and we support each other in any way that we can, in whether it is an advocacy project, whatever it is. I really hope that we form strong relationships and we continue to connect after COP. And in terms of attending COP and my perspectives or my expectations of COP, it will be my first COP. So I am not exactly sure what to expect. However, I do hope to, again, form strong networks, and I really hope to learn from other people, to hear their perspectives and understand their situations, which is a really big thing for me. When I advocate for people and groups, it is usually always something personal. I want to understand you so that I can advocate for you. And so I really hope to learn from others as much as I can. And in terms of advocating for my community, that is the Indigenous community, I really hope that I can really put myself out there and meet people who have similar perspectives, or learn from people with diverse perspectives in terms of Indigenous rights or the just transition, things that really affect Indigenous peoples. And yeah, so also in terms of preparation for COP, I've stocked up on, my snacks and everything, really trying to make the most of the situation. And yes, I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope that I get to meet everybody. I hope that I get to meet people from other organizations who will be at COP. And I hope that we have a really good time in terms of more serious issues. I expect wins for Indigenous peoples, the Caribbean, the Global South, and it might be ambitious given the history of these sort of conferences. As Joshua said, we usually, I would not say usually, but oftentimes we see these organizations and the results from these organizations are usually on paper, and we do not get constructive results, tangible results from this. I hope it is different in this COP, and I hope that at the end of it, the Indigenous peoples, Caribbean region, the Global South, we walk out of COP satisfied with the results of the negotiations and the conference. So
Thank you so much, Whitney. And as with all of you, I've learned a lot from your kind of respective islands, but also the kind of particular interests that you have and the communities that you represent. And we've had some sort of fabulous discussions and collaborations with different Indigenous groups and leaders in the lead up to COP. And I'm really interested to see where those conversations go and how we can push the representation and the respect for these communities forward. So thank you for doing fantastic work, and I really look forward to seeing you on the stage at COP and also behind the scenes and having these discussions and collaborations with different communities. So thank you, Whitney. I'm really hoping that we get to hear from Nigel and Genesis this time. So should we try round 2 of the camera and the mic? There we are. Can you guys hear us?
Hi, everyone. Hi. Okay, so right now, we are at a hello.
Maybe without this.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Yes, it's a little bit disjointed, but keep going and I'll let you know if it's I think they're gone. Okay, I think that is maybe all we're gonna get from them from now. So maybe we can jump to the Q&A section now that we've heard from the majority of the delegates, and if they get to log back on, then we can hopefully hear from them. So I want to start with maybe kind of similar order with Tyrell, and if any of you guys have some comments, please do leave them in the chat for me to relay.
Testing,
But
testing.
are they back?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can see
Can you
you.
hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Hopefully the internet will last. It might be buggy here and there. We're in a gathering in Mexico currently representing Caribbeans. So like, my name is Nigel Maduro. I'm from representing the indigenous Caquetío Nation, and I'm here with Genesis.
Yep, I'm representing. Thank you so much for having us. Sorry about all the issues.
Yeah, we're currently sitting aside on the ground trying to find the best spots for the Wi-Fi. So if it cuts midway, please forgive us, but we're trying our best. So yeah, I think should I go first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Ari?
Yeah, can you hear us good? Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Perfect, perfect. Yeah, so I'll go first. Yeah, so my name is Naj Maduro. I am indigenous Caqueteo from Aruba. I am a sustainability scientist specializing in climate change, indigenous people's rights, and sustainable development and agroecology. I'm also an intersectional environmental activist in Aruba, known for my land back movement and my No More Hotels movement.
Guys, maybe
Doing radical protests and social movements.
Guys, maybe if you turn your video off, your sound will be better.
Maybe if we turn our camera off, would it make the
Yeah.
audio better?
Yeah, reduce the bandwidth.
Okay.
Test. Can you hear
Yeah.
us better now?
Much better.
Okay. What did you? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I'm an activist in Aruba. I do also move and into um and and yeah, usually to do is I
Okay. Back to plan B, which is Tyrell. I had a question for you, and as I said before, if they can log on again, we would love to hear from them. But for now, we would love to hear some more questions from you guys. So how do you see your project in Trinidad and Tobago influencing policy or inspiring similar initiatives in other SIDS? And actually, if all of the delegates could put their cameras on and we can maybe do some quick fire questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the participation of the general public as it relates to issues of the natural environment, particularly climate change, is very important. So I think, as I just tell you, the project that I work on at Caribou is very community focused. And when you help empower people with knowledge as well as the different tools to speak up for themselves, to advocate for themselves, to properly communicate what is happening in their surroundings and environment. I think that could be very effective to increasing participation because in climate and building climate resilience and adaptation. I think something that the climate space lacks, and I know you asked about policy, but I know you also speak about general climate action. I think something that the Climate Space Act lacks, and even general environmental issues, is public buy-in, public understanding. I think if people understand how some of these issues affect their daily lives itself, so building the capacity of people to better understand environmental issues, speak up for themselves is a way of empowerment and getting them um, more involved. And I definitely think for Caribou, when it comes to policy, now we may not directly like influence policy as perhaps being in the room, but again, just sharing the perspectives of things that are happening on the community and local level is, civic engagement in a way. And we have had a few stories that we have written about. For example, there's an oil spill in Tobago a few months ago, and that story got a very sizable readership. I think people notice these things, and in a way, people begin to question like what is happening in the environment, who is managing the environment, what are some of these shortfalls and so on. So I think it's a way of just increasing, the literal voice of people and how they participate in climate change. So I know I didn't directly address the policy aspect of it, but I do hope that for me, something that's very important for climate action and any kind of environmental action is participation. So building the capacity of people to better participate in these processes, for me, feels like a win. And hopefully people take note of that, especially decision makers.
Amazing. And yeah, I think this idea of like, how can you care about something that you don't know about, or you can't relate to, or you don't have understanding of? And I think that's what's really fantastic about your journalistic work and bringing light to these issues that perhaps people around the world don't have exposure to. Myself, I'm from Europe, and we in London don't face the same challenges that you do, and it's really important to put exposure and put highlight the issues that that are going on different parts of the world, so that we can really kick into action and do our part as well. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, and if I may just really add quickly, also doing work in the biodiversity space, because as I previously mentioned, I just had the very extremely humbling honor of attending COP16. I think advocating in that space for a greater harmonization of biodiversity and climate. I think because of like the structure and these different conferences and so on, I think sometimes lost in translation that climate change and biodiversity loss is like twin issues, and they need to be addressed as twin issues. Biodiversity policies need to include climate policies and vice versa. I think in terms of my advocacy work, I think when it comes to policy, I definitely try to raise that a lot, especially when I'm like meeting, for example, with party delegates at these conferences and so on. I mentioned the need for policies and actions to be very comprehensive.
Thank you, Tyrell. And if there's any questions that anyone has on that, just please do put it in the chat, and we'll also share the LinkedIn and email communication with all the delegates should you guys want. Okay, Whitney, gonna go in just the order of how I see you guys on the screen. As a representative from Dominica, what role do you see Indigenous knowledge playing in advancing climate resilience strategies, both at COP and more broadly?
Hi, Ari, I didn't hear that. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah,
I think Wi-Fi's having issues.
I will also put it in the chat so that you can see it. But effectively, my question was, how do you see Indigenous knowledge informing climate resilience strategies?
Right, so I apologize if you hear noise in the background. So yes, Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous traditions are absolutely important for informing climate resilience, climate policies. And I personally do not see a lot or enough of it in our policies, that is Dominica. But I would say it's very important. First of all, as you have mentioned in your conversation with Tyrell, understanding the people that you are writing policies for, it is absolutely important. To me, it's counterproductive to produce a policy without adequate research, without the evidence-based research to support the policies that you are making for these people. So understanding the Indigenous peoples, their traditions, their knowledge is extremely important for drafting policies, for implementing policies. And not just important, I think it is also respectful of these people, especially as First Peoples of the country, of the region. It is absolutely respectful thing to do, to understand their perspectives, to understand their situations, their challenges, to inform policy. So I think Indigenous perspectives, it is absolutely important for that purpose. We, as Indigenous peoples, there are certain techniques that are, I would say, more beneficial, or Tyrell help me find the word, the journalist, in sustainable development, in the practices that we need to achieve climate resilience and climate justice. So for examples, the mangroves that we have, the mangroves and the environment that Indigenous peoples constantly they protect, all of these things. These are traditions that they have held. These are the knowledges that they hold. These are things that are important to shaping climate policies. These are things that we need to achieve climate resilience in our region. For example, Dominica, we boast of having 365 rivers, but research would show, and I am not saying documented research, but from people who have gone about in just my community alone, we can see that our rivers are drying up. So whereas before we had all our beautiful rivers, we have people actually taking care of these areas, we don't see that anymore. And looking at Dominica's policy, please do not. Anyways, looking at Dominica's policy, the national determined contributions, I believe the only mention of Kalinago people in there, it's a project for cleaning. And to me, that is not sufficient at all. If you look at the housing that the Kalinago people have done, and it is not the traditional huts that you would see. One of our prominent members of society, Kalinago society, he has implemented this Kalinago knowledge in his construction and his building, and you can see that these are the things that we need to have. These are the things that we need to look at when drafting climate policies for the people, where you go and you consult them, you find out the things that they need and not what you would want them to have, in a sense. So again, Indigenous perspectives, Indigenous knowledge, these are very, very important thing, especially when you are drafting policies for people who have had a history of protecting the nature, protecting the environments, and have done a very good job at it. So I think it is absolutely important, and we need to pay closer attention to these things. I think they need to be at the forefront of our climate policies as much as possible.
Thank you so much. You bring a really wonderful perspective, as I mentioned, that we kind of haven't had on the delegation before. And I think on the ground, it's going to be really insightful to inform the conversations that we have and the discussions that we have with this Indigenous sort of nature-based perspective. So thank you so much, Whitney. Joshua, as with all of you, your efforts in your respective islands are very, very impressive. How do you measure the impact of your climate projects on local communities? And, going to COP, because no one is sort of officially necessarily going to be writing the policy from the delegations, how do you measure your impact at COP? What does that look like? And what are tangible outcomes that you can sort of envision for yourself, but also for other delegates in the team and hopefully some of the people in the audience who either are going or hope to go in the future?
Thank you so much for your question, Ari. Because I'm probably going to be meeting so many people and being involved in so many different things, I hope that, what I have to say, my experience that I have to share, especially coming from St. Vincent Grenadines and our experience with Hurricane Beryl this year, any legal knowledge or any way that I'm able to have conversations with important persons and organizations surrounding these issues. I hope that it indeed has a great impact. So I'm not quite sure how I would measure that. But there are things that can be measured. For instance, when I go to COP, I plan to take photos, I plan to take videos, post them on my various platforms. And of course, on Instagram, Facebook, you can look at the metrics. So hopefully those things would be measurable on social media. Me sharing my experience, me sharing how COP was for me sharing some of the insights I would have gained or some of the solutions or decisions that came about, those will be measurable. Social media is very easy to measure your impact and to measure the content that you create and publish. So I plan to use my own personal platforms, my LinkedIn, and also my organization, SVG's platforms, to just highlight my whole overall experience at COP and through social media metrics, measure the impact or how many persons that is actually reaching. Apart from social media, another measurable method is Google surveys or questionnaires. So based on what I learn or some interesting topic or conversation, I'm going to send out a poll, whether it's through my organization or just through my general platforms, and just asking persons for their feedback on specific issues, because moving forward, I want to focus a bit more on the climate change and climate justice aspects of human rights and legal work. So just to get persons' opinions on a number of different questions or issues would be good. And Google Forms, is one of the most effective ways of, getting feedback and seeing, what persons are looking for, and even seeing how your impact is, just in case by chance we post a question and say, did you like these photos or videos? Would you like more of them in the future by chance we happen to go to COP? Who knows? Again. So those are some ways that I would like to create an impact, of course, by having conversations, important conversations with different people, different organizations, of course, with Island Innovation and other organizations that will be present there, being a panelist, being a part of different discussions. There's going to be so many persons probably there, but hopefully it reaches a large number of people, and, hopefully they go away, even if nothing is developed concretely, then it plants a seed in their mind. And hopefully that seed can grow in the future and be something bigger. But apart from what I can't measure right now, I plan to use social media and Google Forms as a way to measure my impacts at COP. So those are some ways that I think I can measure my impact at COP29. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know what, when I asked that question, I didn't even think about actual kind of like tangible stats and tapping into those sort of algorithms. I think it's really smart, and this is why it's important to have these conversations, because actually when you produce a kind of physical report, say, of your time at COP, to have those numbers, to have that interaction, to see what was impactful, what people engaged with more, the kind of forms people engage with, whether it's visual, whether it's written, whether it's, activism, whether it's policy. I think it's really powerful. So thank you for that perspective. And I know it's kind of cheating, but I want to ask that same question to the rest of you guys, because that sort of sparked just just a different angle that I think if we can gather more information about what impact looks like for everyone, and that's also not just about outcomes for other people, but emotionally, what will feel like a successful COP to you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. So, Chelsea, maybe if you want to jump in here and kind of understand or explain to us what a successful COP could look like, that'd be really helpful.
So my colleagues would have somewhat touched on a lot of it, but I think definitely seeing, I think some of the conversations that we've been having throughout the CCJLA and all the weeks that we've been meeting is that we're generally tired of talking, and we want to see actions, and we want to see enforceable, legally enforceable actions, right? Where we can definitely hold countries, governments, leaders accountable for their actions and whether or not they're meeting their commitments. And I think that some of the conversations that I've been seeing online as well is that this may potentially be the last COP that we can assess where we are in terms of the Paris Agreement, that some of those commitments coming under. So definitely looking to see how serious our leaders are going to be from the youth perspective as well, to make sure that our voices are heard from an intersectional perspective, like what Joshua would have mentioned, to ensure that the human rights considerations are there as well, and tying in what Whitney would have mentioned, indeed, for Indigenous peoples and communities. So success and measuring all of what Joshua would have mentioned in terms of stories coming out from COP. I'm definitely looking forward to sharing those, learning and following online as well, some of the conversations that are happening within my country, to see how our general public is receiving or perceiving what's happening, and definitely just to try to make it more accessible, and so that people can know that, yes, policy, it's all technical, but bringing it down to see how it's going to be affecting us going forward, because really all the decisions that are being made will be shaping our future, so we have to be involved. Over
Thank you
to
so
you.
much. Thank you. And maybe Tyrell and Whitney, I know we have one hand up in the audience. So maybe if you could give like a one-liner, two-liner of a successful personal COP would look like for you, and then we can quickly go to the audience and then have enjoy the rest of our evenings before everyone travels this week.
Yeah, so I'll make it very brief. I like to make the joke that I could go on a rant, but honestly, for me, I just think a successful COP would leave there, me leaving there feeling inspired, and a little way of feeling hopeful that what I'm doing or what others are doing are really genuinely, as Chelsea say, contributing to meaningful action. I mean, we know there is a lot of doom and gloom, rightfully so, with these issues, but I really want to just leave feeling hopeful that something is being done and someone is actually, contributing to meaningful change.
Beautiful. Whitney?
Hi, yes. I'm just gonna continue on something Chelsea said, looking at how our leaders approach COP. So a successful COP for me would be leaving knowing that my leaders have represented Indigenous peoples well, because even if I am there as a participant, they would have more influence. So I really hope leaving that we are represented and that we leave with some sort of victory for Indigenous people. So going home, I know that I am supported and that my community is seen and supported.
I think, yeah, being seen as a huge part of COP, and I really hope we can help facilitate that. So thank you guys. I don't want to butcher the name in the chat. Farcredden. Apologies if that's not correct, but I would love to hear your question if you're able to unmute yourself. Or Jerome, if you're unable to mute them, I think should be allowed to talk. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can. Hi.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm from London. It's around 11 o'clock now. So one of the things I have noticed recently that Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, they did, a nuclear plant deal for their power supplies. And it seems that it's going forward and they're making this deal a normalize, because after that the other companies will follow them, and maybe in every corner we might have seen a nuke plants, which is very, very dangerous for the earth. And not only that, the waste nuclear plants produces, they cannot be dismissed in thousands of years. So my question is there anything catch your attention regarding this, and are you going to discuss this in the coming COP? Because no one seems talking about it, and this is very, very dangerous for the things we are talking about, our future generation and everything. We cannot, make it happen, and we cannot normalize nuclear plants so easily for just power supplies. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I know that there's lots of themes at COP, and there are very kind of specific areas that people take interest in. And I couldn't speak on behalf of any of the delegation on whether they're experts in these fields. Please do speak up if that is you. But I guess as a general question on this point, just before we wrap up, is maybe policy that's being put through that has really dangerous implications on the planet and the issues surrounding that. So maybe if anyone, just a few words from one of the delegates just on those kind of legally binding policy mechanisms that are rigid and difficult to then retract, I think was the kind of overarching question. Would love to just have a few words from one of you on that. Any takers? If not, Joshua, I'm coming for you as the lawyer. You're up.
Well, as we've all been seeing tonight, persons go to these conferences, representatives from states and organizations go to these conferences, and oftentimes they're having these discussions. We're signing these different agreements. Important agreements have come out of COP from the past, but yet still we're finding people signing things and writing things, and they're arguing about the wording of different documents and how it should be passed and all of that. And when you finally come to an agreement, whether it's a treaty or a resolution or whatever agreement is formed, you find that states oftentimes lack, and even organizations, because organizations come together and say that they're going to do this. They create different policies within their own organizations, and then they're still, adversely impacting on the environment and not really keeping basically to their word. So that's a really huge issue, I think, domestically among states and also within organizations. It's easy to say something, it's easy to sign something, but when it comes to the actual enforcement of our words and our actions on the ground, then that's where I think we come into a lot of trouble. And a lot of persons, unfortunately, act in their own self-benefit. So they would sign stuff just to look good, reputation-wise, but they're not really serious about, what they are committing themselves to. And oftentimes, for states, it's difficult, to force them to do something regarding nuclear weapons or and so forth, unless the state agrees to do it. There's no jail to put a country in. The leaders have to, of their own volition, decide that this is something that they want to commit to and they want to take action. So we just have to continue to have those conversations and hopefully find a way, to get them to see that, what they're doing is bad and commit to greater actions, to various strategies, of course, which I'm sure we've all been discussing over these last few years or however long in our own line of work or organizations. Now, when it comes to organizations, because I remember you mentioning Google and so forth. Now, these organizations might be a bit more easier to tackle legally because you could actually carry them to court. And have the issues addressed quicker. You could carry countries to court too, we have the International Court of Justice and so forth, but oftentimes the state still can't be put in a jail. But a company could shut them down, you could sue for how much money, a state might just choose not to comply or leave the UN, leave the OAS, leave the treaty, for whatever reason, because they don't agree with what is being proposed or what decision has been made, even if it is something that they signed up and obligated themselves to. So I think at the end of the day, it really just becomes to what people come down to what persons and organizations and states value, and persons, willing to actually not just write something on paper, not just attend fancy meetings and look nice and have their reputation look good, but, to actually mean what we say, to take action, and to have these actions enforced. Because what's the sense of us signing all these documents and we can't really hold people, organizations, or states accountable? So I think that's the main challenge when it comes to, international issues like this. How do we hold people accountable? How do we enforce what we've signed, what we've discussed, what we've agreed to? And for organizations, that are doing illegal things, how do we really hold them accountable? Because, they can be shut down and just create a new company. The same persons, can keep doing the same thing. So yeah, there's a multiplicity of issues, that really can be addressed. Unfortunately, this webinar isn't a legal conference, and it could take us weeks and months to discuss all the legal, dynamics and issues and so forth. But it really comes down to each individual country and organization really making that commitment, sticking to that commitment, acting to that commitment, and holding themselves and others accountable. We need to be accountable for not only the present, but the future, because our actions are going to affect future generations. So thank you so much. I hope I helped in some way. I know that this is a very complex discussion, but I hope that I was able to, share my opinion. Thank you.
Create a separate webinar just for Joshua to take us through the ins and outs of the law surrounding COP. But thank you so much for your question, and I appreciate you may have another one, but all of the delegates have put their details in the chat, and we're tagging them religiously on the account, so hopefully you can access them those ways as well, and just typing their name into LinkedIn. Should you guys have any more
I will
questions?
just take 30 seconds more.
Okay, 30 seconds.
I would request all of you, please raise question from, from your social network, because we need to raise these questions, because these companies, if you evaluate their, valuation, they are maybe like, bigger than 30, 40 third world countries. So, they have the power as well. And they're dealing like $1 billion, signings. So they're not going to look back. So we need to make them, responsible for their actions, because it's impacting us, and we can do it by raising our voice. That's it. And I'm actually, kind of, I'm feeling bad for this. And seems I'm the only person who is, raising this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And this is why the delegates are at COP. It's to be the voice of the people who aren't on the ground and who don't have the same access to these rooms. And so, please do send them your questions. Please do send them your asks for COP. And I really, really hope that we can do you justice. I know they will. And we're here to facilitate them in any way we can. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who has attended, and to the incredible speakers. Today's discussion, I know it could have gone on for much, much longer, but it's been a powerful reminder of kind of the crucial role that the Caribbean voices have to play in the global fight against climate change. And we really look forward to seeing how these young leaders shape the future. So please do look out for them on the social media channels, and I think they'll be very happy for you guys to reach out. And yes, safe travels everyone in the lead up to COP, and thank you guys